Genesis chapter 4 narrates the story of Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve. Here's a summary of the key events. Before we start, we'd like to ask for your support. If you enjoy our video, please hit the like button. This will help us reach more people and create content for you. Now let's get started with today's video. Genesis chapter 4 is a pivotal chapter in the Bible that introduces the first instance of human sin leading to violence, the consequences of jealousy and anger, and the spread of humanity through the descendants of Adam and Eve. This chapter follows the events of Genesis chapter 3, where Adam and Eve disobeyed God and were expelled from the Garden of Eden. The consequences of that original sin begin to manifest in their children, leading to the first murder in human history. Verses 1-2. The birth of Cain and Abel. The chapter begins with Adam and Eve's firstborn son, Cain. Eve's declaration, "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord," reflects her acknowledgement of God's role in creation and perhaps her hope that Cain might be the promised seed who would crush the serpent's head. As mentioned in Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, Abel, their second son, is born shortly after, and the narrative immediately differentiates their occupations. Cain becomes a tiller of the ground, and Abel a keeper of sheep. This distinction in their vocations sets the stage for the conflict that follows. Verses 3-5. The offerings and God's favor in the course of time. Both brothers bring offerings to the Lord. Cain offers the fruit of the ground, while Abel offers the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. The text notes that God had regard for Abel and his offering, but not for Cain and his offering. The reasons for God's differing reactions have been the subject of much debate among theologians and scholars. Some suggest that the quality of the offerings was different. Abel brought the best of his flock, while Cain's offering may have been less than the best of his produce. Others point to the possibility that Abel's offering was more in line with the later sacrificial system, which often involved blood sacrifices. Another interpretation focuses on the attitudes of the brothers. Perhaps Abel's heart was more aligned with God's will, while Cain's was not. Regardless of the precise reason, Cain's response is immediate and telling. Cain was very angry, and his face fell. His anger and despondency indicate that he felt deeply wronged, possibly perceiving God's favor toward Abel as unfair. Verses 6-7. God's warning to Cain. God addresses Cain directly, asking him why he is angry and why his face is downcast. God's rhetorical questions serve not only to prompt Cain to reflect on his emotions but also to offer him a choice. God warns Cain that sin is crouching at the door and desires to have him, but he must rule over it. This image of sin as a predatory animal waiting to pounce suggests that Cain is at a crossroads. He has the opportunity to master his anger and prevent it from leading to sin, but he must make a conscious choice to do so. This passage introduces the concept of human responsibility in the face of temptation. It underscores that, while sin may be a powerful force, individuals have the agency to choose their actions. Verses 8-9. The first murder. Despite God's warning, Cain invites Abel to go out into the field with him. In the isolation of the field, away from any witnesses, Cain kills his brother. This act of fratricide is the culmination of Cain's unchecked anger and jealousy. The brevity of the narrative in describing the murder, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him, adds to the horror of the act. The first death recorded in the Bible is not a natural one but a violent premeditated murder. After the murder, God confronts Cain with a question similar to the one he posed to Adam after the fall. "Where is Abel your brother?" Cain's response, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" is both a lie and a deflection. His question implies that he bears no responsibility for his brother's welfare, highlighting his disregard for familial and moral obligations. Verses 10-12. The consequences of Cain's sin. God's response to Cain is swift and severe. He reveals that Abel's blood is crying out to him from the ground, a powerful metaphor for justice and the sanctity of life. The ground, which had already been cursed because of Adam's sin, now becomes even more cursed for Cain. God declares that the ground will no longer yield its strength to Cain, making his life as a farmer untenable. Additionally, Cain is condemned to be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. The idea of blood crying out from the ground introduces the concept of innocent bloodshed calling for divine justice. It also foreshadows later biblical themes where the land is defiled by violence and requires purification. Verses 13-15. God's mercy to Cain. Cain's reaction to his punishment is one of despair. He laments that his punishment is too great to bear and expresses fear that anyone who finds him will kill him. This fear is ironic, given that Cain himself did not show such concern for his brother's life. However, God, in his mercy, places a mark on Cain to protect him, declaring that anyone who kills Cain will suffer sevenfold vengeance. The nature of the mark is not specified, leading to much speculation, but its purpose is clear. God ensures that Cain will not be killed, despite his grievous sin. This act of mercy illustrates the complexity of God's justice. While Cain is severely punished, God does not allow the cycle of violence to continue unchecked. The protection given to Cain prevents others from taking vengeance into their own hands, which could lead to endless bloodshed. Verses 16 to 17. Cain's descendants. Cain goes away from the presence of the Lord and settles in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The narrative briefly shifts to Cain's descendants, noting that he builds a city and names it after his son Enoch. This development is significant for several reasons. First, it marks the beginning of urbanization and the development of human society outside the direct presence of God. Second, it suggests that, despite his curse, Cain's line continues to flourish, at least in worldly terms. The mention of Cain building a city also raises questions about the nature of human progress. While cities are often seen as centers of culture and civilization, the fact that the first city is built by a murderer casts a shadow over human achievements. It suggests that even human ingenuity and progress are tainted by sin. Verses 18 to 24. The line of Cain and the legacy of violence. The narrative briefly traces the descendants of Cain through several generations, culminating in Lamech, a descendant who also commits violence. Lamech's declaration to his wives that he has killed a man for wounding him introduces a further escalation of violence. Unlike Cain, who expresses remorse and fear of retribution, Lamech boasts of his actions and claims that if Cain is avenged sevenfold, he will be avenged 77-fold. Lamech's declaration highlights the spread of sin and violence within human society. It suggests that the initial act of murder has set a precedent, leading to an increase in violence and a distortion of justice. Lamech's attitude also reflects a growing sense of human pride and defiance, as he seems to mock the divine protection given to Cain. Verses 25 to 26. The birth of Seth and the hope of redemption. The chapter concludes with a brief return to Adam and Eve, who have another son, Seth. Eve sees Seth as a replacement for Abel, whom Cain killed. Seth's birth introduces a new line of descendants that will eventually lead to Noah and, later, to Abraham and the nation of Israel. Significantly, the text notes that during the time of Seth's son Enosh, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. This marks a shift back towards seeking a relationship with God, in contrast to the line of Cain, which is associated with violence and defiance. The mention of people calling on the name of the Lord suggests the beginnings of organized worship and a communal recognition of God's sovereignty. Themes and theological implications. 1. The nature of sin. Genesis chapter 4 explores the nature of sin, particularly how it manifests in human relationships. Cain's sin begins with jealousy and anger but quickly escalates into violence. The narrative shows that sin is not just a private matter but has social and communal consequences. 2. Divine justice and mercy. The chapter also presents a complex view of divine justice. While God punishes Cain severely, he also shows mercy by protecting him from being killed. This dual aspect of justice and mercy is a recurring theme in the Bible. 3. The spread of sin. The story of Cain and Abel introduces the idea that sin is not static but spreads and intensifies over time. This is seen in the escalation from Cain's murder of Abel to Lamech's boastful violence. 4. The sanctity of life. The blood of Abel crying out from the ground emphasizes the sanctity of human life and the seriousness of shedding innocent blood. It suggests that violence against one person affects the whole community and the natural order. 5. Human agency and responsibility. God's warning to Cain about mastering sin highlights the importance of human agency. Individuals are responsible for their actions and must choose to resist sin. Please subscribe my YouTube channel. I hope you like this video. Thank you.